Hi, and welcome to episode 45 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. And today we've got a special musical guest, but first we'll get to our hosts.
My name's Heidi Smith, and I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin.
Hi, I'm Stephen Hamblin. I'm a postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
Hi, I'm Tom Housley. I'm a PhD student at the University of Stirling in Scotland.
And as I mentioned, we've got a special musical guest this week. We've actually got the peer-reviewed rapper himself, Baba Brinkman. You want to say hi, Baba?
Hi, everybody. I'm Baba Brinkman from Vancouver, Canada, and I interpret science and literature via rap.
Whoever is led to believe that species are mutable will do good service by conscientiously expressing his conviction. For only thus can the load of prejudice by which this subject is overwhelmed be removed.
So what you know about natural selection? Go ahead and ask a question and see where the answer gets you. Try being passive-aggressive and try smashing heads in and see which tactic brings your plans to fruition. If you have an explanation in mind, then you're wasting your time, 'cause the best watcher is blind. Takes a certain base kind of impatient mind to explain away nature with intelligent design. But the truth shall set you free from those useless superstitious beliefs in a literal Adam and Eve and that Edenic myth, because their family tree is showing some genetic drift. Take it from this bald-headed non-celibate monk with the lyrical equivalent of an elephant's trunk. It's time to elevate your mind state and celebrate your kinship with the primates. The weak and the strong, who got it going on? We lived in the dark for so long. The weak and the strong, Darwin got it going on. Creationism is dead wrong.
The view which most naturalists entertain, namely that each species has been independently created, is erroneous.
Awesome. This is exactly what we need on the show, is something entertaining instead of us just talking all the time.
All right. I'll do my best.
Really should have had Tommy on for this one.
We'll have to set up the rap battle another time, I guess. But so, Baba, I guess the best place to start is, how did you become the peer-reviewed rapper?
I started out with literature. I was doing the Canterbury Tales for several years. That's my background. I did do some undergraduate bio, but my degree was in the Canterbury Tales, and I wrote a rap adaptation of Chaucer, toured it around England, and at one point a biologist saw the show, and he recognized my potential. So he reached out to me and said, do you think you could do for Darwin what you did for Chaucer? And challenged me to write an evolutionary biology rap show to follow up my Canterbury Tales one, and I thought that was a great challenge, so I did it. But this scientist, Mark Palin, who's now at University of Warwick, he hit me with a challenge. He said, because you're in the position to embarrass me, if you go in front of my science colleagues with a bunch of poorly thought out lyrics, you're going to have to give me all of your rhymes to fact check them beforehand. And so once I had been through that process, I could stand in front of crowds and say, if you got a problem with what I'm saying, take it up with my sources. And so then I started calling myself a peer-reviewed rapper.
Nice. So where do you feel like you fit in the whole hip-hop landscape? Is there a particular genre that, do you identify with, like, nerdcore, or is it?
I don't really identify with nerdcore, and the reason is because I've just never listened to any nerdcore. Nerdcore is not part of my sphere of influence. I grew up listening to rap music, to Nas and Wu-Tang Clan and Biggie and Eminem, and then when I discovered nerdcore, I had already been doing extremely nerdy rhymes for several years at that point, and people were telling me, there's this genre called nerdcore and you're part of it. But my initial reaction was, well, how am I part of it if I've never heard of it? So it's an example of convergent evolution. But there's elements of nerdcore that I associate that I relate to better than others. So a lot of it is nerdy in the sense of explaining physics or biology or the Large Hadron Collider, and other parts of it are nerdy insofar as it's about promoting Dungeons and Dragons and Star Trek and stuff like that I don't really relate to so much. So I feel like the word nerd is a large umbrella, of which I rep some things under it and less so other things. And also hip-hop is a large tent. And my feeling has always been that hip-hop is a large enough tent to include extremely nerdy content as well. One of my inspirations was the song Chemical Calisthenics by Black Alicious, where Gift of Gab just breaks down all chemical equations. And I figure I'm just taking stuff that was existing in rap, the sort of science and literature referentiality that already existed in kernel form, and I'm just expanding it into a new niche. So I'm an offshoot on the phylogenetic tree of rap, and it may or may not end up becoming a part, a thriving niche, or it might end up becoming, I like to call myself the platypus of hip hop. But that doesn't give it the potential. If the platypus is probably not going to take over the Australian ecosystem, whereas the ancestors of mammals after the KT extinction did take over the entire world. So who knows? Maybe I'm one of those early mammals, or maybe I'm just a throwback echidna.
That's amazing.
That's easily the best analogy I think we've ever had on this podcast.
Yeah.
So kudos for that.
And when we hear somebody who's actually like popular and stuff use scientific terms properly, we get all giggly inside,
Well, why don't you guys drop a couple hip hop references and I'll have the same reaction.
All right, let's make a joke about Jay-Z. Let's go.
So I was going to ask, your song "I'm African." That's after a Dead Prez track, right? So did you have to get in touch with them and be like, "I want to redo this, but with an evolutionary biology theme"?
Did I ask permission? The answer is at the beginning, no. I just wrote the track and put it out there as a song and put out the video and everything and was performing it in my live show. And my rationale is that Dead Prez have remixed loads of other rappers' tracks in their mixtapes. So they put out a whole mixtape album called Get Free or Die Trying, which was a takeoff on 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying. So I figured I'm going to follow in the tradition of Dead Prez by appropriating their music without asking permission, which is what they do. But then when the show got picked up by an off-Broadway producer in New York, and it was going to be on the main stage and have thousands of people come through and be publicly advertised, the producer did the sensible thing and reached out to the publishing company that owns the rights to that song, and we licensed the rights so that when I performed it off-Broadway, we didn't get sued.
Huh.
But I still haven't
wonder
heard whether Dead Prez, what they think of it. I was hoping they'd come see the show when it was running, but they never did. So one day I hope I get to do the performance with them in the crowd and recruit a whole bunch of white people and Asian people and Hispanics and the range of the rainbow crowd and get them all shouting "I'm African" and see whether Dead Prez feels like I've insulted them or feels like the vision has really been enlarged.
So I was at the Science Online conference, and so was Morgan.
Ah.
But I remember at first yelling, "I'm an African," and you're sort of like, "Oh, is anyone gonna feel?" Yeah. But no, it was really great. I wanted to ask, you've had to learn such like a smattering of science here and there. If you what's your favorite area? If you had to become a scientist, what would you specialize in?
That's a really good question. I think maybe psychology or some realm of psychology, just because as an artist, you're always trying to read the crowd and trying to understand what's going to get a reaction and how people relate to certain stories or social dynamics. So I guess like a social psychologist or a moral psychologist or an evolutionary psychologist or someone that studies human social dynamics. I don't think I could, at this point, I couldn't study human social dynamics in anything other than an evolutionary context. But so maybe an evolutionary psychologist. I don't know if just because already I've gone so far into trying to relate to the human side of the evolutionary picture. I think that's where my fascination would be. And I do have this whole other show, Ingenious Nature, the Rap Guide to Human Nature, which explores a lot the those ideas as well. So that's probably where I'd go. But who knows?
So do you think this is the kind of work you do, the kind of songs you put out, is this a really small niche? Like, do you think you're going to be the only one in it for quite a while, or is this going to be, something that grows and attracts more artists and more attention?
It's a very small niche because I'm not nearly famous enough. The bigger I get,
we're working on that here.
It'll be. That's an interesting question. I don't know where it's going to go, and I don't know. I keep seeing more and more stuff online about people doing science raps, or just sort of science songs and music. And there's this recent project with the Jizza collaborating with Chris Emden and Neil deGrasse Tyson to do physics and cosmology-based rap music and teach high school students with it. And there's lots of parody rap songs online. So far, the science rap genre is almost all comedy parody. And I do that as well. You know, some of my things are comedy parody, as the Dead Prez song was, but I've also done quite a few original songs that aren't takeoffs on anybody else's stuff. And I've had a few people email me and say, I want to be a science rapper too. I'm trying, you know, following in your footsteps or whatever. But none of it's really, you know, gotten as big as any of the mainstream stuff, and I don't know if it will. I think it partially is about how entertaining science is, period, or how much part of pop culture is science, period. Because, you know, how many of the films that come out are about science, or how many of the books that come out are about science? It's a pretty small percentage, but it seems to be a rising consciousness or a rising intrigue with people. So the more people care about science, the more they're going to look to their entertainers to speak on scientific issues. And I hope that bodes well for me having an audience in the future and other science rappers having an audience.
Well, that's actually a good point, because we talk a lot on this podcast about science communication and alternative routes to it and things like that. And so I wonder, so you're actually, you know, out there communicating science in a way that people can relate to. Have you seen an effect of this? Like, are you getting a lot of positive response to it? People saying things like, you know, this inspired me to do something, or I learned a lot from it, or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had people say that they relate to the idea of natural selection in a personal way like they never did before. I think if people haven't had a personal encounter in either a course with an inspiring teacher or picked up the right book by Steven Pinker or Richard Dawkins or E.O. Wilson that really like transported them, a lot of people think of evolution as something that scientists study in a lab and that happened in the past, and they don't see it as sort of presently relevant to their interactions with people and their social life and their likes and dislikes and things like that. So in that regard, I've had a really overwhelmingly positive response from audiences. A lot of them saying, I think I get it now. I see the patterns. And a lot of people tell me that after the show, the whole night will be just a ranging conversation about various things in their life and relationships and family dynamics and things that they suddenly start to relate to evolutionary instincts and legacies that they never did before. So, you know, in that sense, yes. But I don't know if I've made any scientists. I know I've made a few Chaucerians, though, but that's because I go way back with the Canterbury Tales stuff. A professor at the University of Glasgow recently messaged me and said that her new master's student told her that she started studying the Canterbury Tales in medieval literature because I went and performed a rap in her high school in 2005, and that got her turned on to it.
That's awesome.
That's incredible, yeah.
That's a really fantastic story for that. So I guess another question along this theme would be, who is both your target audience, which I assume being an entertainer is everybody, I guess. So who is your maybe specific target audience, and who is your realized audience? Who have you been kind of performing for lately the most, or who's been giving you the most support?
Well, I mean, I have two different spheres that I target sort of in parallel, and one of them is off-Broadway and public theater and the fringe festivals and just anywhere that I can be in a public performing arts venue that people will buy tickets to come see the show. So Rap Guide Devolution ran for 5 months off-Broadway, and it was a huge range of diversity in the audience. It was African Americans, it was white people, it was pensioners, old people, the sort of, you know, theater ticket buying, like semi-retired New Yorkers kind of style, but then also young college kids and, you know, professional Google employee types or whatever. So it was a whole range. And then in between there being a public show, then I usually get booked to perform at a lot of conferences. Like some of you saw me at Science Online, and I do these tours where if there's some kind of conference or event or gathering or professional association or whatever, then I get booked to be the entertainment. So, you know, those are more niche audiences where almost everyone in the crowd is a professional. But I think if I was just targeting conferences only, then it would have a much lesser impact. It has to sort of be tested on the street, so to speak. It has to be written for a random audience. It has to be written for like a young person who just likes rap, hears about that the show's on, and drags their like 65-year-old great aunt to see it or whatever, and then, you know, and they end up both liking it. That's what I'm aiming for, is to have everybody like it who comes through the door. But when you talk about realized audience, very good point, because I can't get lots of people to come through the door because of preconceptions about rap being an aggressive, sort of hostile, brutish art form that's too abrasive for them. I'm not a rap fan type of person. A lot of people think, and then also some people think that the content is going to be too cerebral for them to enjoy themselves. So I hear about a lot of people who come see the show once and they're like, oh, I was trying to get my friends to get tickets, but I couldn't convince them that they would like it, and it was really frustrating. So I just came again by myself, and I can like picture little dollar bill signs with wings flying away from me at that. But how do you figure it out, that key to make everybody think this is a good idea when they hear about it? But what generally happens is that those who come through the door have a great time, and a lot of people don't, and I wish they did. And it seems to actually boil down when it comes to who is coming to my show. It's not about a race or an age or a demographic or anything. It's about the psychological predisposition or stable personality trait known as openness to experience. The higher people are in the facet called openness, which from what I've read is heritable, 50 to 60% heritable, stable across a lifetime, the higher you are in openness, the more likely you are to give it a shot. And the lower you are in openness, the less likely you are to give it a shot. And then there's lots of people in the middle that I can convert if I get them to give me a shot. So that's my main target audience, is people who are high in openness.
Have you done any outreach to younger audiences? Have you had any chance to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've performed in lots of high schools, and I don't really. Young people come to my shows sometimes on their own or sometimes with parents, so that's my main way in the public sphere. And then in 2 weeks I'm going to London to do a series of performances in London high schools, and probably performed in about 30 or so high schools. Rap Guide to Evolution, I've done it in last year. I performed it in a high school in Tennessee, which was wasn't so well received there.
They're like, what's evolution?
Yeah, it was super surreal. It was pretty much the same show that you guys saw in Ottawa or at Sci Online, but a little bit longer. And yeah, the teachers
with a few more pitchforks.
The teachers were pissed off. Actually, they handed me a note midway through the show. They actually stopped me, and the note just said "Stop cursing!" ! And I looked at it, and I had this moment where I was like, I thought I did edit the cursing out, because usually I say motherfucker in there and like there's swear words all drop through, but I was like, I'm in a high school, I'm not going to swear. And then I realized it's because in the chorus of I'm African I go, hell yeah, and I know what's happening, I'm an African, damn right, yeah I know. And so I realized it was hell yeah and damn right that they were reacting to. So then I did this little thing on the mic, like, I assume the cursing being referred to is the words hell and damn, and I apologize for saying them, but in Canada, those aren't swear words. I said those words as a high school student in my classes, and my teachers didn't care. So apparently we have a cultural difference here, and I'll stop using them now. And then I was told later that the teachers were furious that I said the words again in order to do the moment. And it went downhill from there. But some of the students were pretty enthusiastic. I will never forget, there's always a question period at the end, and the two questions that stood out. One student said, what if Jesus comes and blows up the world? What will you think of evolution then? And that was a totally sincere question. And then the second one was, wait, if it's all about reproductive success, are you telling us that we should have sex or we shouldn't have sex?
Oh, no.
And that was from a 15-year-old girl. And you could just see all the teachers sort of get stern and look really serious. And it was one of those, like, you could feel the thin ice crumbling all around. So I said, evolution doesn't tell you anything about what you should or shouldn't do, but evolution does make the strong prediction that you're going to really want to have sex. You can decide for yourself whether you do or not, but at least you'll know why you feel that way. It wasn't a very popular answer or performance for the teachers anyway. Lots of the students seemed to like it. Other students didn't, actually. One of the students was tweeting angry stuff at me. He said, if I'm not allowed to pray in class, how come we have to sit there and listen to an atheist talk to us?
All right, so we got to ask this, because, I don't think you can be a hip-hop artist without having beef with somebody, right? And recently you've gotten to a bit of a thing with Jeremy Yoder about your campaign, Don't Sleep with Mean People. So yeah. Can you tell, for the audience who doesn't know what it is, can you describe the campaign a little bit and talk about what happened there?
Okay, so Don't Sleep With Mean People has been part of the Rap Guide to Evolution since day one. Since 2009, I wrote this song called Darwin's Acid, and it's about the sort of philosophical implications, like what is if natural selection is true and purposelessness is is that design and our origins come from the randomness of mutations and natural selection. What does that leave us with the ability to do? And I could think of three things that you could do. You could, you can influence evolution via selective breeding if you're a farmer or whatever. That's kind of trivial. You can influence cultural evolution through your decision about, for instance, what artists to support, what products to buy, what politicians to vote for. That can potentially have at least an indirect influence on evolution. For instance, if you vote for politicians that support ecosystem protection, then you're influencing the niches of animals that might go extinct otherwise, or whatever, right? So cultural evolution can potentially influence genetic evolution. And then I was thinking, is there a conscionable way that we can influence genetic evolution? Because all the attempts throughout history have been sort of ethical disasters, right? Eugenics and the Holocaust and all of the sort of philosophical attempts to meddle with genes, especially at the population level, and genocide. None of this has been defensible. But the one that I could think of that really seemed uncontroversial to me is mate choice. We all reserve the right to choose our own sex partners, and our sexual choices have consequences in terms of the genetics, at least of our own offspring. So then the next question is, in which direction ought we to try to influence genetics via our mate choices, or should we not? Should we just make our choices blindly and let our instincts take over? And I figured you could have lots of variations. You could say don't sleep with cigarette smokers. It would have an impact, but a lot of cigarette smokers wouldn't like it, right? You could say don't sleep with dumb people. There's the concept of idiocracy, and people think that natural selection is going to lead to a lowering of intelligence overall. But mean people was the one that I settled on because I think all things being equal, cruelty and aggression and violence and bullying are the worst things out there. It would be much better to be in a world full of simple-minded, warm-hearted people in the future than it would be to be in a world filled with Machiavellian evil geniuses. So if you try to select for intelligence, which I think people sort of instinctively do, most people think that being smart is more attractive than being an idiot, then then I think there's dangers in just selecting for intelligence. So I said, okay, we'll go with don't sleep with mean people as a way in which individuals can have some probabilistic influence on the future population genetics. So then that was just one line in the Rap Guide to Evolution. Then it was this line that kept getting singled out by people. Audiences would say, great show, but that don't sleep with mean people thing, oh, I sure wish I had thought of that when I was a teenager, because all these relationships and da-da-da, and people, it was the one that people really had a personal response to and reaction to. And the Scotsman newspaper, when they reviewed the show in Edinburgh, said, you should check out Bubba's plan for world peace. It makes sense and it would work if we could only put it into action. And reviews were picking it out and stuff. So for the off-Broadway run, I wrote it into an anthem where it was like the whole crescendo of the show was don't sleep with mean people, and I had this big chorus, and I got the crowd to sort of throw their hands up and take the pledge, and it worked great as a big rabble-rousing finale for the show. Don't sleep with mean people, that's the anthem, please think about your granddaughters and grandsons. And so then the show ended, and I'm like, it's too bad that don't sleep with mean people as a concept has only really been encountered by people who came and saw the live show, because it wasn't one of the music videos that were funded by the Wellcome Trust. So I was like, well, maybe I can crowdfund a new music video for it and sort of spread it as a meme and see, maybe it could be one of those things that just gets quoted, like, oh, this girl that I'm interested in seems nice, but she spit on this homeless guy yesterday, and it made me think twice about whether I should really get involved with her or whatever. And if you hear that from your brother, you go, oh, don't sleep with mean people. It could just be one of those things that just sort of comes up in conversation, and then maybe would tip a few people's. Obviously, meanness is one personality facet compared to lots of other ones that could equal, if you're interested in a person and they're mean but also super creative and have a great sense of humor and are intelligent and resourceful and loads of other good things, but they're mean, that might actually be a better match for you than somebody that's super nice but also like an idiot and inept and bad with money and like lots of other things, like no talent, whatever. There's like whenever you're interested in mating with somebody, there's a huge range of factors that come into it, but I figure on average looking out for meanness is a good thing. As for the beef, Jeremy Yoder critiqued it because his main argument was, well, at first he seemed to be saying that we're not sure whether meanness is genetic or not, or he sort of sneered and said like, oh yeah, because the main facet of meanness is genetic. Then we went back and forth with a bunch of citations, and so then it was admitted that yes, meanness does have a genetic component, but only within certain environmental triggers. So it seems like his main argument was that if you don't know somebody's environmental history, then you, in practice, are not going to be able to know whether their mean qualities are genetic or environmental. It's very difficult to control for that with humans, and therefore the sort of slogan or concept, don't sleep with mean people, is useless because you're not going to be able to actually select against mean genes, because in each case it might be environmental. And my response was, well, if you just boycott all meanness, then genetic and environmental influences are going to get caught in the same net, and yes, you will be hitting the genetic ones as well, and the environmental ones. And I've always said from the beginning, it's a sort of twofold, it's a sort of double-edged sword. If you don't sleep with mean people, potentially on average, mean people will be less likely to have reproductive success. So there is a small genetic component, like some genetic component, non-determined amount, but more immediately it's going to be a behavioralist influence. People will act less mean in order to not be celibate. So then, that influence is a completely cultural and environmentally instigated one. So it's sort of meant to get at the changes in gene frequency by way of remodeling the environment. If we can change the cultural environment to one in which meanness is less celebrated, less tolerated, and less, less sort of let slide, then meanness will become less adaptive and over time be selected out of the human gene pool, at least on average, probabilistically, and to some degree.
Well, what you're
I
describing.
don't really know what Jeremy Yoder thinks of. I still don't understand why he doesn't think that would work if people took it up. He wasn't arguing that people will never go for it. Lots of people have done that. They've said, well, it's a great idea, but you'll never convince people not to sleep with mean people. But that wasn't his argument. It was, even if you convinced everyone not to sleep with mean people, it wouldn't influence the amount of meanness in the world, which I found was I lost him somewhere. It was baffling to me. And I'd love to hear other people chime in to see who you agree with in that debate.
Steven's a really mean person, so it's hard for him to say anything.
Yeah, he's got selfish interests at heart.
And yet
I like
nobody's
don't
trying to sleep with
have unprotected sex with mean people.
But then you would lose the behavioralist incentivization. Mean people would just get laid just as much, and the only reason they would act less mean is because they like having unprotected sex.
Yeah, but wouldn't they be insulted? They're like, why are you using a condom? What do you mean? Is it because I'm mean? Yeah. It can happen.
If they stop getting laid, they'll stop being as mean. If they stop getting laid with people except with condoms, I don't think it would really have any impact, But that would be a way that you could narrow the campaign down to only influencing genes and not influencing behavior. But the reason I don't go for that suggestion is because the main impact of the slogan is to influence behavior directly through learning and conditioning. And a sort of interesting side effect is that it'll have a genetic impact, at least some genetic impact, who knows how much. But, boycotts happen all the time. Political boycotts, corporate boycotts, don't eat at McDonald's is a political campaign that you can subscribe to, but it's not going to influence genes. Don't sleep with mean people is interesting and a good teaching tool because it's just like every other political and corporate boycott, except it also potentially has a genetic impact.
Plus, it's got to be harder to make a chorus if you have to put except without a condom in it.
That's it. Yeah.
It just ruins it.
There are many variations. There's been so many objections brought up to it, and some of them are totally valid. I mean, for instance, one person in the campaign said, well, if it's not consensual sex or if there's coercion, well, obviously, but don't consensually sleep with mean people doesn't work as part of the chorus either. It's got to be assumed, that we're talking consensual sex, and don't sleep with genetically mean people doesn't work as a chorus either. But I think even if half the people that are being mean are because they're born that way, and half the people that are being mean have angel genes, but they were just brought up in bad environments, I think the slogan should still be applied to everybody equally, because people react to social pressures. People respond to incentivization in their immediate peer group, and sexual choice is one form of incentivization.
Cool. Well, we're almost out of time. We're pretty much out of time here, so you've obviously shown that you do have the peer review background for being the peer review rapper, and now that you've got some academic beef on your side, then you've definitely made it into the academia.
I've made it my practice to never beef with rappers, only with scientists and politicians.
Because we're really bad at making diss tracks?
Because
He's
you're
like,
You can hit me back in other ways.
All right. So, as people want to follow along with your career and such, where can they find you online, Baba?
I'm at BubbaBrinkman.com. I'm at Bubba Brinkman on Twitter. I mean, basically, my name will take you to all my stuff all across the internet. And if you got listeners that haven't checked out the Rap Guide to Evolution in the past, I'd say don't leave it up to the imagination. Go check it out. See how it measures up against your standards of rap, your standards of music, and your standards of scientific communication. And I hope, or I try to make it so that it registers high on all three.
Cool. So that's definitely good advice. Everybody should go out and give a listen to Baba's Rap Guide to Evolution. It's a pretty entertaining thing, especially if you're a scientist or an evolutionary biologist. So I'd like to thank Baba for stopping in and talking to us today. And you can find us at breakingbio.com or on Twitter at breakingbio. And until next time, hope you all enjoy yourselves, and remember, don't sleep with mean people.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
okay, bye.